Got any friends that want to come up today? Yeah. We're going on a field trip today, y'all. Field trip. All right, Alistair, field trip. We good? There we go. All right. Heidi, you coming? All right. Wonderful. Cool. Should I sit down first? Because I'm just going to have to stand up right again. Congregation, you're going to help me out today. Grab those hymnals. Blue book. Oh, yeah, it's happening. You all know. And you know this song, 128. 128. Why am I wearing white? Well, we're celebrating the Feast of the Epiphany, which is one of the last feasts of the Christmas season. So, I got a question for you all. Why do you think we have stained glass, all these stained glass windows in the church? It is protecting the church. It's keeping the winds out. Yes, very much. Yes. What about the pictures? They represent stuff. They sure do. So they're symbols in the windows, right? And they tell us a story. And I think we've had windows in churches for a really long time, don't you? Yeah. And I learned that some people couldn't read. Yes. Yeah, you do that. And so people would look at the windows and it would tell them a story. Do you know where the Christmas window is in here? Yeah, let's go over there. Okay. Yeah. So this is I call this one the Christmas window. And that's because, what do you think this is right here? Jesus was born, and what is that, you think? It's a stable, it's his bed, it's a manger, right? And so that's sort of like the trough, and there's some hay in it. And so Jesus was put in the manger. What do you think this is? And who followed the star? The wise men followed the star. And what do we think the wise men were? The three kings. And this is where the congregation's going to help me. There's a famous song. You know why we sing songs too? Because the songs tell us a lot about our story too. And so on hymn 128, there's this really great song. Do you know what it is? We Three Kings of Orient Are. Have you ever heard that one? Well, let's listen. Let me sing it. We three kings of Orient are, bearing gifts we traverse afar, field and fountain, moor and mountain, following yonder star. Oh, star of wonders, star of light, star with royal beauty bright, westward leading, still proceeding, guide us to thy perfect light. Have you heard that one before? No? That's like the all-time Epiphany song. That's like number 1 on the top 10 charts. This song talks a lot about what the kings bring. Do you remember the gifts? Miss Teresa, are they lighting the white candle in their class today? You got it, man. Upon request. Well, they bought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And each one of those are in the song. But let's go back up front. That's the Christmas window, so you know where it is. 2 worms. Yeah. Purple and pink. Both of those are colors in Lent. Yeah, man. Everything's liturgical, dude. All right. Let's sit down. So I want to tell you, so we know their names. we think we know their names. Their names were, keep me right, congregation, Balthazar? Balthazar's right. Casper, or Gaspar, right? And Melchior? I'm getting the thumbs up, so we're good. Well, one of my favorite stories about the three kings is by a guy by the name of Johann of Hildesheim. And he told this story that the kings lived for a really, really long time after they saw the baby Jesus. But as with everyone, it comes time for us to die. And so Balthazar was the first. He lived to be 116 years old. He did die on a cross. And Balthazar worshiped him his whole life. And when Balthazar passed away, he died on the 8th day of Christmas. Not too long after that, Caspar passed away on the feast of the Epiphany. They were both laid in a tomb side by side. And guess what? When Melchior finally passed away 4 years later, when they brought Melchior's body to the three kings that were already buried, the two kings that were already buried moved apart so that Melchior could be buried in the middle of them. Why did the thieves die on the cross? That's a great question. Why did the thieves die on the cross? Well, that was the Roman punishment for thievery, right? Is that they would be executed. And you know what Jesus said to the thief on the cross, Alistair? The thief said sorry, yes. Do you know what Jesus said to the thief? The other thief wasn't very repentant. He said, no, sorry, you're right. But Jesus looked at the thief that was repentant and said, today you will be in my Father's house. Today you will be with me in paradise. And you know what? That only happens in what gospel? I think that only happens in Luke. Miss Teresa? Go have fun lighting the white candle. You can tell them about how we wear pink sometimes. All right? Good deal. Gonna have to fact check me on that one, on a few of those things. But I think I'm all discombobulated because all the Amazon deliveries have slowed down. And I don't really know what's happening in my own neighborhood. The golf carts with these sort of like speed demons delivering packages to the doors, they have stopped. You know the ones I'm talking about, the ones that have like the street legal golf carts that can go down a street at 35 miles an hour, and they can like definitely place like a package right on your front step by just chucking it out of the front seat. You know that? You know those? Maybe it only happens in Colonial. I don't know. But yesterday, I observed folks sort of taking down their Christmas lights, taking down their wreaths, deflating their lawn ornaments. And to tell you the truth, it all looks rather drab in my neighborhood now. But then there's us Episcopalians who are still rocking the old Christmas, right? Got all the poinsettias out. And we do that because today we are celebrating one of the final feasts of the Incarnation, of course, the Epiphany. But I would be remiss if I didn't remind you, good Christians, that we do so by breaking some of the church's rules of liturgical law today. That's because the Epiphany was really yesterday, and that feast doesn't move around. Well, we did. We moved it to today. Today is actually known as the baptism of our Lord. And it's a rather significant incident, given the fact that we are reading Mark this year. This is year B. And the first thing that happens in Mark's gospel is Jesus' baptism. You're right. So I guess that's my way of just drawing awareness to that we're bucking societal trends here, and we're breaking some laws. But whatever. However, Epiphany, in my mind, is larger than just one event. The most commonly referenced is, of course, the visit of the Magi, the visit of the three wise men that we read about this morning, that we read in the Gospel of Matthew. But in the Christian tradition, they also weave some different incidents into the Epiphany narrative that depict Jesus in a manner that is more than meets the eye. And they do this as the season after Epiphany sort of widens up before us. One we've already talked about, of course, is Jesus' baptism. And you know that story. Jesus comes to John in the River Jordan. John sort of balks at Jesus's standing in front of him asking to be baptized, and he goes, shouldn't this be the other way around? And Jesus, in my sanctified imagination, quotes the great band Kansas when he says, "Carry on, my wayward son." No, only up there. Jesus says, "Allow this for now, because this is the way to fulfill all righteousness." And then, of course, right, the heavens open, and Jesus hears the voice from heaven saying, this is my beloved son. I'm very pleased, right? He hears that from God the Father. And if hearing a voice from heaven wasn't enough, right, seeing the heavens opened before him, we get this manifestation of the Spirit in the form of a dove that comes down and is present at Jesus' baptism. The baptism of our Lord is well documented. It's in all the synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, though they're a little bit different, right? In Matthew and Mark, it talks a lot about why Jesus was baptized. In Matthew and Mark also, it suggests, as it should, that Jesus is the primary recipient of the vision of the heavens opening and of hearing the voice of God. Only in Luke does the same set of verses sort of reshape our view of that moment, because Luke is specific when he says that other people were present. Mark and Matthew don't, right? Mark and Matthew, I think maybe it's assumed that they're there. But Luke is particular to point out the fact that other people did see and hear. And I think just that slight variation on it is very important for us as members of St. Luke to know that story, right? But also to encounter this sort of new awareness. Especially as we enter the season after Epiphany. New awareness is something that's remarkable. The other incident besides, that folks kind of focus on, the other incident besides the baptism of our Lord is, of course, the wedding at Cana. And I think we'll probably hear about that next week. That's one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible, right? Is this marriage feast that's happening, of course, with Jesus talking to his mother the way that he does, right? You know, and the fact that water gets turned into wine. Y'all seen that meme on Facebook, right, where someone goes in the water section and puts a bunch of wine up there? That's Christian mischief right there, right? But I love this story, and I haven't really gave credence to the fact that John often editorializes some of his stories. I haven't really paid attention to that fact. I've always kind of put it aside because I'm like, John, you're talking during the movie, man. You don't need to tell me all this stuff. But it's really helpful in the sense, do you remember that part in the marriage ceremony where the head waiter finally tastes the water that has become wine? And he's like, where'd this come from? Right? He has no idea where it came from. But John parenthetically says to the reader, right, the servants did. The servants knew where the water that had turned into wine came from. And that's an important distinction for us to grasp as we enter Epiphany 2. Who sees what? And who knows what? And then, of course, there's the wise men themselves. Some believe that they were astrologers, some magicians, others Persians. Still others Zoroastrian priests, and even that there may have been more than 3. Some say they were present at the manger. Others say that they most certainly went to a house 2 years after Jesus was born. And because of this, we don't quite know where to place these guys, even though they're legendary, even though we know their names. Are they part of the Christmas story, or are they not? Are they instrumental in ways that show that Jesus is Lord of all? There's a curious story about how they have been represented in art. Sometimes they're shown as sort of looking like the different ages of men. It's a really old one, middle-aged man, and then a younger one. And then even that they're different races. White, black, Asian, right? Sort of lending this idea that Jesus is Lord of all, not just to the Jewish people, but to the Gentiles. That's an important distinction to make, too, as we enter the season after Epiphany, that Jesus is Lord of all, especially to those who believe. And so Epiphany is not just about revelation in my mind, like coming across new facts and new ideas. Like, I've had an epiphany. It's not just that. It's also closely associated with other aspects of holiness, if not part and parcel of what is known as a manifestation, an event or an action that clearly embodies an abstract idea about God. Abstract in the sense like it can exist in my mind, but maybe not in reality, because it's just, how would that work? Kind of like God becoming man. How does that work? An epiphany is an unveiling of this reality. And thus, I don't think that the last reading that we get at the end of this season, the one of the transfiguration, I don't think that that's a coincidence for us who worship in this mode. I don't think that should pass us by. Because it's kind of like the ultimate unveiling of Jesus in his mortal life, unless you take into consideration the resurrection. And even there, in both accounts, there is this idea of who sees what and who understands what. In the Transfiguration, right? You know that story. They go up the mountain. Jesus is there with Moses and Elijah, 2 baddies right on his side, right? What do Peter and James do? They look at that and they're like, I'm out of here. They hide their faces, right? Peter stands in front of them and he goes, I'll make some houses. He doesn't know what's really going on, but he knows that like he needs to do something, right? And some say that like he's missing the point or that he's taking the moment for granted. Whatever, man. Have you seen Jesus like with Moses and Elijah by his side? If you have, then I will stop and I will listen to you right now. But I'd probably, if I saw that, I'd be over there with James and John. Like, I don't know what's happening, but, I'd probably be scared, man. All of them are told not to say anything. They're told not to say anything until the Son of Man is raised from the dead. And that's perhaps the most splendid and solemn epiphany of them all. There's this guy by the name of Edwin Friedman. And he once wrote that the colossal misunderstanding of our time is the assumption that insight will work with people who are unmotivated to change. I think that insight is really important for us who enter Epiphany too. Communication, in Friedman's mind, doesn't depend on syntax. It doesn't depend on eloquence or rhetoric or articulation, but on the emotional context in which the message is being heard, and I would add, being engaged. The principle states that people can only hear you when you are moving toward them. And so in our case as Christians, that we can only really hear Jesus and see Jesus when we are moving towards him. And people are not likely to hear you when your words are pursuing them. Even the choicest of words lose their power when they are used to overpower. Attitudes, thus, are the real figures of speech. And the reason I bring this up is because when we ponder these moments of great theological awareness, like the wise men, like the baptism of Jesus, the adoration of the shepherds, the wedding at Cana, it's rather easy to be overcome by their charm. Enchanted as we have become with this season, or on the other hand, as ready to be done with it as humanly possible. Epiphany becomes for us a major turning point for us in the church and in our lives of faith, whether we like it or not, where a great failure of syntax can occur if these manifestations, if these epiphanies remain just lovely stories to us. What we choose to see in them is just as important as what we choose to do with them. Because actions, as you no doubt have heard, speak louder than words. How you see Jesus in your life is an epiphany. How you hear Jesus in your life is an epiphany. How you follow his commands makes a difference in the way that you manifest his presence here and now in your lives. And hopefully all those choices, all those understandings involve grace. For our life is what our thoughts make it. And so may you experience in the visit of Kings this year openness and acceptance and wonder. In the waters of baptism, may you know that nothing can separate you from the love of God. Absolutely nothing. The bond that's been created between you and God is, as the prayer book states, indissoluble. And in the water that has become wine, may you come to know just how precious the sacrifice of his love is for you. And in that understanding of all of that beauty, may you go and do likewise.